out in the Pacific Ocean lies Australia, important though remote outpost of European civilization, which we visited just prior to its involvement in the latest World War. Regardless of what the future may hold in store for this strategic land, former impressions cannot be obliterated, and it is with this thought that we now present a pictorial review of our memories of Australia. We recall the city of Melbourne with a population of over 1 million inhabitants, all of whom opened their arms in welcome to the great war hero, General MacArthur, and pledged themselves with all of Australia to support him and the cause of democracy. In the cities of Australia, we were particularly reminded of modern progress, which is a great credit to that branch of the white race that has so commendably established itself down under the equator, over 9,000 miles from its mother country. But geographical isolation had in no way curtailed the modern spirit of Melbourne. In fact, it seemed to have helped it, as we found a general tendency on the part of the people to be ultra-modern in their viewpoints, and all departments of civic service competed in the performance of their respective duties. Of all the beautiful gardens in Melbourne, there was one in particular that bore unusual distinction, for it was officially dedicated to the pioneer women of Victoria, and it inspired Nathaniel Shilkret to compose a song which he dedicated to this garden as well as to the modern women of Australia.
A mist that's modern and this old-fashioned garden combined are too divine to be true. They are the theme of the loveliness you dream of, the future that you scheme of for you. She's just a little old-fashioned and yet enough modern, a beautiful bloom in a lovely garden. I'd like the power to paint this modern flower in this old-fashioned garden of love.
With much reluctance, we left Melbourne and continued our journey on Australia's crack train, the spirit of progress, en route to New South Wales. Among the scenic highlights of Australia, we recall the Blue Hills region, noted for the blue haze which hangs in the valleys at all seasons of the year. Here is illustrated something of the vast uninhabited areas of a country the size of which is seldom appreciated by the world at large. To those of us who think of Australia as a little South Sea island down under the equator, inhabited largely by primitive bushmen, let it be known that it is about the size of the United States in land area, although its population hardly exceeds that of New York City, and almost 98% of this population is of British origin. The Australians are an outdoor-loving people, justifiably proud of the many natural attractions with which Mother Nature has so generously endowed their country. This love of outdoor life also manifests itself in the cities, such as Sydney, where the streets are wide, clean, and airy. Sydney has grown so rapidly that it now has over 1.25 million inhabitants. The Commonwealth of Australia is composed of 6 states, the most populous of which is New South Wales, with Sydney as its capital. And each of these states is governed by a parliament over which a premier presides. In the suburbs of Sydney, we found picturesque and colorful parks, abounding in subtropical vegetation, and a general atmosphere of peace and tranquility. The Taronga Zoological Park and Aquarium, one of Sydney's chief attractions, was noted for its rare specimens of plants and animals and birds, not the least of which were the kookaburras, also known as the laughing jackasses of Australia. One of nature's greatest freaks is the duck-billed platypus, which is at ease in water as well as on land. It has a fur coat, a beaver-like tail, and webbed feet. It quacks like a duck, cries like a baby, and, believe it or not, it lays eggs and suckles its young. The most lovable animals in this land of animal oddities are the little koalas, the teddy bears of Australia. Koalas are nocturnal in their habits, and consequently, most of their daylight hours are spent in sleep. At night, they prowl about from tree to tree, seeking a certain type of eucalyptus leaf, which is their only food. At about 4 years of age, koala is fully grown and may live for 15 or 20 years. In Australia, but nowhere else. Aside from animals, Taronga Park also featured many unusual floral attractions, as well as colorful vistas of the world-famous Sydney Harbor. Only a few years ago, this harbor was a haven of peace, although even then the distant drums of war were warning Australians of the Japanese menace, and nervous minds were already forecasting sinister and inevitable things to come. Sydney Harbor has many gateways which open to friends as they close to enemies, and it will probably figure as one of the great turning points in the Pacific theater of the war. The sight of this gigantic Empress of Britain floating so peacefully here fills our hearts with sadness, for she has since found a watery grave on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, a victim of the ravages of war. At the time of our visit, boating, fishing, surfboard riding, and swimming were the popular sports, and they were engaged in with a spirit of gaiety that was fittingly expressed in another song composed by Nathaniel Shilkret and dedicated to Bondi Beach.
Starry nights on the beautiful beach of Bondi, what a chance for romance within everyone's reach here at Bondi. Every breeze from the seas whispers, please hurry back for we miss you. Troubles will fly, bid them goodbye here on the beautiful beach of Bondi.
At club carnivals, members competed in life-saving events, which were dramatized for the entertainment of the vast audiences that witnessed them. Most of the men marching in this impressive parade have since been marching on the battlefields of Africa and Europe, as well as in the jungles of Malaya. And we can judge by what we see here something of the strength and fortitude that characterizes the fighting men of Australia. Although these picturesque scenes only serve to remind us of a time when Australia was at peace, they help to illustrate the human fiber that is Australia. And we feel that when the final history of the latest World War is written, the Australians will have proved themselves worthy of their responsibility as the guardians of democracy in the Southwest Pacific, way down under the equator. And it is with this thought that we now conclude our memories of Australia.